There is a sentence modern people hear and instantly misunderstand. A man should be dangerous. At once the objections begin. Dangerous to whom? Dangerous in what sense? Is this merely the old male fantasy dressed up for YouTube? A romantic excuse for aggression, domination, or some adolescent cult of hardness? And because the age is so practiced in missing the point, one has to begin by saying what should be obvious. A dangerous man is not a violent man. He is not a bully, not a thug, not an unstable narcissist with a grievance and a gym membership, not a loud fool who mistakes intimidation for strength, not a petty tyrant with podcast opinions and a protein shake. That sort of man is not dangerous in any admirable sense. He is merely ungoverned. And there is nothing impressive about a creature who cannot control himself. The man worth speaking of is dangerous in a higher and rarer way. He has force. He has teeth. He has the capacity to resist, to confront, to punish, to endure, to stand his ground, to say no, to make himself difficult to violate, corrupt, humiliate, or use. But that force is under discipline. It is sheathed, governed, directed, subordinate to judgment. That is what makes it respectable. The lamb is not virtuous because it does no violence. The lamb is harmless because it cannot do otherwise. There is no moral triumph in being incapable of defending yourself, your principles, your family, or your dignity. There is only incapacity. And incapacity, however fashionable the culture may make it, is not a virtue. This is why the modern worship of harmlessness is one of the more dangerous confusions of our age. We are constantly told to be nice, soft, safe, agreeable, non-threatening, well-regulated, emotionally available, and above all, never too forceful in any direction that might trouble the great therapeutic machine of the age. We are asked, in effect, to become beings without edges, pleasant, manageable, endlessly self-disclosing, incapable of menace, and therefore incapable of genuine protection. But a man without edges is not peaceful. He is merely easy to handle. And a society full of easy-to-handle men is not a civilized society. It is a society waiting, patiently and stupidly, to be ruled by harder men. That is the first thing one must understand. If good men become too weak to impose themselves when necessary, bad men inherit the earth by default. This is not cynicism. It is history. Civilization has never been protected by the harmless. It has been protected by men capable of force, who restrain that force within a moral order. Soldiers, fathers, statesmen, lawgivers, reformers, explorers, dissenters, martyrs, builders, all of them, in their different ways, possessed danger. They could withstand pressure. They could cause consequences. They could refuse submission. They could make tyranny, chaos, and predation expensive. And because they could do these things, peace was sometimes possible. A man who can protect nothing is not peaceful. He is merely irrelevant to the question of peace. Now, the reason this subject is so badly handled is that modern people confuse danger with abuse and strength with pathology. They have seen enough examples of masculine force in its degraded forms: domestic cruelty, drunkenness, arrogance, violence, vanity, coercion, that they instinctively treat all male potency as suspect. From there, it is a short and lazy leap to the conclusion that the highest type of man is the least threatening one. But that is nonsense. The highest type of man is not the least threatening. He is the most threatening under control. That distinction matters more than ever. because we are raising generations of men who are taught to fear their own force before they have ever learned how to govern it. They are encouraged to become harmless before they have become strong. They are taught apology before mastery. They are trained to monitor themselves morally before they have built a self-worth monitoring. The result is often not virtue but paralysis. A man uncertain whether his strength is legitimate becomes hesitant in all domains. He hesitates to speak plainly, hesitates to defend boundaries, hesitates to protect, hesitates to lead, hesitates to risk disapproval, hesitates to assert standards, hesitates to make demands of himself and others. And then, because nature hates a vacuum, this hesitation is filled by one of two things: passivity or resentment. Either he becomes soft, diffuse, over-accommodating, and inwardly ashamed, or he overcorrects into caricature, the swaggering poseur, the compensatory brute, the amateur despot, the man who has discovered force, but not form. Both are failures. One is neutered strength. The other is undisciplined strength. Neither is manhood. Manhood, if the term is to retain any dignity, must mean the marriage of force and restraint, the capacity for danger integrated into a moral intelligence. A dangerous man, then, is one who can do damage and chooses carefully when not to. He can absorb pain without immediately collapsing into self-pity. He can bear conflict without losing his head. He can speak unpleasant truths without begging forgiveness for them. He can protect what is his. He can confront what threatens it. He can impose consequences. He is not easily bullied by institutions, crowds, fashions, or emotional blackmail. He is not cruel. He is not reckless. He is not looking for excuses to dominate, but nor is he available for easy capture. This matters at the level of the individual, of course, but it also matters at the level of culture. For the modern world has become remarkably adept at producing men who are technically competent and existentially defanged. Men who can operate systems, manage spreadsheets, discuss feelings, optimize routines, and consume content indefinitely, but who cannot hold a line against anything that truly tests them. They are highly socialized and poorly formed, capable of endless communication, almost no command, capable of discussing values, reluctant to pay a price for any, capable of signaling concern, unable to stand upright under pressure. Such men are useful to bureaucracies, to markets, to ideologies, to large systems that prefer compliant units to sovereign individuals. They are less useful to wives, children, communities, or civilizations when actual danger arrives. And danger always arrives. That is another of the fantasies sold by comfort, that the world can be made permanently frictionless, but life remains what it always was, vulnerable to violence, humiliation, corruption, betrayal, coercion, collapse, disease, deceit, bad luck, and the predatory ambitions of others. The man who is not dangerous in the face of these things is not good. He is simply unprepared. One might put the matter this way: you do not become dangerous because you love violence. You become dangerous because reality contains wolves. It contains predators in the literal sense, and in the institutional, social, erotic, and ideological senses too. There are people who will exploit weakness, systems that reward cowardice, movements that demand submission, employers who prefer pliancy, mobs that feed on hesitation, and temptations that invade precisely where no inner hardness has been cultivated. A man who cannot defend himself externally is vulnerable. A man who cannot defend himself internally is already conquered, and that internal conquest is worth dwelling on. because the most important form of danger may not be physical at all. The truly dangerous man is dangerous first to what is base in himself, to his own laziness, to his own appetites, to his own cowardice, to his own vanity, to his own self-deceit. He can say no to himself. That is the beginning of all seriousness. A man unable to master his own cravings is not dangerous in the noble sense. He is merely another servant of impulse. He may be aggressive, intimidating, imposing, even feared. None of that means he has power. It means he has poor brakes. Power begins with self-command, the capacity to resist appetite, to delay gratification, to absorb discomfort, to act according to principle rather than mood, to remain composed in insult, to remain upright in temptation, to remain lucid in crisis. This is why discipline is the school of danger. A man becomes dangerous not first by collecting weapons, tattoos, or opinions about civilization, but by becoming harder for chaos, including his own chaos, to rule. He rises when tired, works when bored, speaks when silence would be cowardice, keeps silent when speech would be vanity, trains his body, orders his time, refuses certain pleasures, endures certain pains, submits himself to standards that do not bend for convenience. Such a man begins to acquire weight, and weight is what the modern world increasingly lacks. It is full of men made of reaction, appetite, and public performance, but not many made of substance. Not many who can absorb a blow without theatricality. Not many who can hear a hard truth without dissolving. Not many who can disagree without hysteria. Not many who can make themselves formidable without becoming ridiculous. Why is this? Because dangerous men are difficult to mass produce. They require fathers, or father substitutes. They require initiation, they require tests. They require chosen hardship. They require consequences. They require standards not endlessly negotiated away by comfort and sentimentality. Above all, they require permission to develop force before being told to apologize for having it. And that is precisely what the modern world often withholds. It does not know what to do with male aggression, except pathologize it or commercialize it. On the one hand, it condemns the rough energies of young men as inherently suspect. On the other, it packages counterfeit versions of masculine power for sale in the form of supplements, status theater, lifestyle branding, and digitized dominance rituals. Neither approach produces serious men. The first produces guilt-ridden passivity. The second produces theatrical vulgarity. What is missing is the old and difficult labor of formation, taking raw force and teaching it aim. For force itself is not the enemy. Misaligned force is the enemy. Force without conscience, force without restraint, force without proportion. But to attempt to solve that problem by abolishing force altogether is like trying to prevent fires by outlawing heat. You need heat. You need the capacity to burn. The question is whether it is in a hearth or in the curtains. This is where the matter becomes philosophical rather than merely sociological. A dangerous man is important because goodness without force is fragile. It may be sincere. It may be attractive. It may even be morally pure in some private sense. But in the world as it actually exists, goodness that cannot defend itself becomes prey to wickedness, manipulation, and contempt. The inability to impose costs on what is evil does not make one saintly. It often makes one complicit in the triumph of the predatory. If you cannot say no, your yes means very little. If you cannot fight, your peace means very little. If you cannot punish betrayal, your loyalty means very little. If you cannot resist corruption, your principles mean very little. Moral life is not made serious by sweetness alone. It becomes serious when sweetness is backed by steel. This is why harmlessness is such a counterfeit virtue. It asks for credit where there has been no test. It treats incapacity as innocent. It imagines that because one has not injured, one has therefore chosen mercy. But mercy is only meaningful where severity was possible. Forgiveness matters only when revenge was within reach. Restraint matters only when force was available. Otherwise, we are simply flattering the timid for their timidity. And timidity, for all its polished modern disguises, remains one of the more contemptible habits of soul. Now, there is of course a danger in saying any of this aloud, because the modern ear is so poor at nuance that it often hears only extremes. Speak against softness, and it assumes you are celebrating brutality. Speak in favor of danger, and it imagines fistfights, prison tattoos, and men barking into microphones about conquest. Speak of strength, and it suspects some dreary cult of domination. But this only proves the poverty of our categories. A man can be dangerous and gentle, dangerous and civilized, dangerous and deeply loving, dangerous and humorous, dangerous and patient. In fact, the best men often are. Because what women, children, friends, and communities trust in such a man is not merely his kindness. It is the knowledge that his kindness is not impotence. It is chosen. It is backed by capacity. It has force behind it, and therefore it means something. One trusts a shepherd, not because he loves sheep in the abstract, but because he also knows what to do about wolves. This is why so many people feel, often without articulating it, that a certain softness in men is not reassuring, but vaguely disappointing. They may praise it publicly. They may call it progress, sensitivity, emotional evolution. But privately, they often do not trust it. They sense correctly that beneath the language of gentleness, there may be nothing but weakness. And weakness, despite all the democratic slogans of the age, does not inspire confidence. It inspires management. People do not follow weak men for long unless bribed, manipulated, or frightened. Women do not deeply respect weak men, even when they pity them. Children do not feel safe around weak men, even when they find them pleasant. Institutions do not fear weak men, which is why institutions like them. There is something almost tragic about the modern, respectable male, trained from youth to be inoffensive, endlessly moderated, deodorized, emotionally legible, conflict-averse, and professionally obedient, only to find that neither he nor anyone else can entirely admire what he has become. He has become acceptable, and acceptability is a poor substitute for character. The dangerous man, by contrast, may not always be acceptable. He may be too blunt for committees, too independent for bureaucracies, too difficult for systems that feed on compliance. He has the bad habit of meaning what he says. He does not love procedure more than principle. He is not infinitely malleable. He has a line. He can be counted on to resist at a predictable point. Such men are inconvenient. Good. Civilization depends more than it likes to admit on inconvenient men. Men who will not lie when lying is administratively useful. Men who will not flatter when flattery is rewarded. Men who will not abandon what is true merely because the room has become hostile. Men who can be threatened and still remain upright. That, too, is danger. The danger of incorruptibility. The danger of non-compliance. The danger of a conscience that cannot be purchased. And if one wants examples of masculine danger at its best, one need not look only to battlefields, though they provide many. One may look to the dissident who speaks under censorship, the whistleblower who exposes rot at personal cost, the father who stands between his children and disorder, the husband who does not abandon his post when tenderness becomes duty rather than romance, the worker who refuses degradation, the citizen who will not parrot lies, the thinker who will not prostitute his mind to fashion. These men are dangerous because they cannot be easily bent. That, perhaps, is the central point. To be dangerous is, in the end, to be difficult to bend when bending would be shameful. Not impossible to break. That would be fantasy. But difficult to bend. This difficulty must be cultivated. It does not arrive as a gift. It is built through voluntary friction, through habits of endurance, through tests of speech and body, through repeated acts of self-command, through refusing the small cowardices before one is called upon to face the large ones. No man rises to an emergency with a character he has not been practicing in ordinary life. If he lies conveniently in peacetime, he will betray dangerously in crisis. If he collapses under discomfort in private, he will likely collapse under pressure in public. If he is ruled by appetite when no one is watching, he will be ruled by fear when everyone is watching. This is why the dangerous man is not made in one dramatic scene. He is made in the 1,000 dull victories over softness, fear, laziness, vanity, indulgence, and excuse. He is made by training when it is easier not to, by telling the truth when a lie would smooth things over, by holding a boundary when affection would tempt surrender, by refusing to join the crowd when the crowd is wrong, by enduring loneliness rather than buying belonging with self-betrayal, by learning one's own anger without letting anger become king, by learning one's own aggression without becoming its servant. That last point is crucial. A man ought to know what he is capable of, not because he intends to use it gratuitously, but because ignorance of one's own capacity is one of the things that makes virtue so fragile. The man who has never met his own anger, tested his courage, or measured his appetite for conflict is often at the mercy of these forces the moment they appear. He either fears them excessively or is possessed by them. In either case, he is not free. The integrated man knows where the darkness is and has taught it obedience. That is a far more serious accomplishment than merely lacking darkness. Now, it may be asked whether all this language of danger, force, and hardness is not somehow out of date. Do we not live in a world of keyboards, institutions, legal systems, service economies, and knowledge work? Is not the age of the dangerous man largely over? On the contrary, it is precisely in such a world that danger becomes more subtle and therefore more necessary. The threats are not only physical, though physical threats remain very real. They are ideological, bureaucratic, reputational, sexual, economic, psychological. Men are ruined not only by blades, but by lies, by temptation, by cowardice, by social contagion, by administrative malice, by blackmail, moral or emotional, by the death of conviction under the acid of convenience. To withstand these things requires danger of a very high order. The danger to tell the truth in a lying culture. The danger to remain masculine in a culture embarrassed by masculinity. The danger to refuse corruption in a culture of euphemism. The danger to protect innocence in a culture of predation, disguised as liberation. The danger to build a family, hold a marriage, keep faith, and transmit standards when every incentive points toward dissolution. This is not less demanding than older forms of masculine danger. In some ways, It is more demanding because the battlefront is interior, constant, and usually unwitnessed. You are not applauded for refusing a temptation. There are no medals for self-command, no victory parades for remaining faithful, no monuments to the man who kept his word under silent pressures no one else saw. And yet, these are precisely the acts on which the moral continuity of a civilization depends. So let us make the point as plainly as possible. The importance of being a dangerous man is that goodness needs protection, truth needs defenders, love needs guardians, children need shelter, women need men who are not merely pleasant but formidable where it counts. Communities need citizens who are not infinitely pliable. And every man, if he wishes to retain self-respect, needs to know that he is not the sort of creature who would fold instantly under the first serious test. That knowledge cannot be faked. No amount of rhetoric will substitute for it. No aesthetics of masculinity will substitute for it. No online persona will substitute for it. Either one has built the capacity to stand, or one has not. And if one has not, it should not be hidden behind sentimental language. It should be addressed. Train the body. Order the appetites. Tell the truth. Take responsibility. Learn to confront. Learn to endure disapproval. Learn to be calm in danger and dangerous in calm. Learn where your line is. Learn to protect. Learn to say no with consequences behind it. Learn to master your anger so that it becomes an instrument rather than a leak. In short, become someone for whom predation, corruption, cowardice, and disorder would carry a cost. That is what it means to be dangerous in a civilized way. Not a menace to the innocent, a menace to what threatens them. And that is the final distinction on which everything rests. A dangerous man is not one from whom decent people must hide. He is one behind whom decent people may safely stand. That is the man worth becoming. Not because it flatters some old myth of manliness, not because it pleases the ego, not because the age will reward you for it. It often will not. But because the world remains, despite all the lullabies of comfort, a place in which much that is good survives only where somebody is strong enough to defend it. And if the good are not dangerous, the dangerous will not remain good for long.